Well, good morning. We're here at the State Emergency Operations Center in Tallahassee. I'm joined with Kevin Guthrie, our Division of Emergency Management Executive Director, Secretary Perdue from Florida Department of Transportation, and Major General John Haas from the Florida National Guard. As you know, as of 8 a.m., Hurricane Helene is now a Category 2 hurricane. It is located 365 miles south of Apalachicola. It is expected to speed up throughout the day, and it's expected to make landfall in northern Florida sometime this evening. Maximum sustained winds are currently about 100 miles per hour. It is possible that this storm could make landfall as a major hurricane, as a Category 3, or even potentially a Category 4. It is moving fast. More rainfall is, of course, expected, and it could lead to significant storm surge in our coastal areas. And so we are prepared for that, of course, and we'll see what happens in terms of the intensification. I think that these things can rapidly intensify. Sometimes they become major, sometimes there's changes. So we're just going to continue to do our thing and assume that this is going to be a major hurricane when it makes landfall. This is a very large storm, so you're going to see tropical weather that's going to extend hundreds of miles away from the center of the storm. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a hurricane Category 3 winds, say on the east coast of Florida, but you are going to have tropical conditions, and it's going to be nasty throughout the latter part of the day here in the state of Florida. We are, of course, looking at the track. If you look at the 8 a.m. advisory, and I think this has been happening probably for the last 8 hours, the models are nudging the center of the storm a little bit east. And that's significant when you're talking about Tallahassee, because I think yesterday we were looking at an eye wall that was probably just on the western part of the city. When the storms hit, the northeast part of the storm is usually the most damaging. And so to the extent it is tracking east and mirroring more of an Idalia track rather than a direct hit on Tallahassee, that is going to impact the extent of the damage. This area has not had a major hurricane hit in quite some time, and certainly nobody in recent memory has seen a storm of this magnitude that has hit. So we'll watch that. There's no guarantee that it's going to continue on that trend, but we have seen that slight trend, and that could potentially be very impactful if you're talking another 30 or 40 miles to the east versus maintaining course or even toggling a little bit west. There will be debris either way. Obviously, if it hits direct into Tallahassee with the trees that we have here, and it's nice, but it will cause a lot of damage. Kevin and his team have been working with local governments throughout the state, but particularly throughout this region, about making sure they have their debris contracts ready to go. There's going to be a need to get debris out of the roadways. Kevin and his team are going to be helping. Jared and his team are going to be helping. But then also with power restoration. You want to be able to get the power back on. The linemen are going to have to access these power lines, and that could be more challenging in an area like Tallahassee than it would be in areas that may not be as wooded. So those debris, all local governments, do your debris contracts. You're going to get FEMA reimbursement for this. Fiscally constrained counties, we've stepped up at the state level and helped them in the past, but I think you can anticipate that there's going to be a need for some serious debris removal. So please take the appropriate steps. As we've said all along, this storm was never projected to make landfall on kind of the Florida Peninsula Gulf Coast, whether you're talking about Sarasota, Tampa, some of those areas, but because it's such a big storm, it's churning a lot of water. And so you're going to see surge all up and down the west coast of Florida. The water is going to rise, and that is going to create hazards as well. So just because you're outside the cone, and I think a lot of those parts on the west coast of Florida are probably outside the cone, that does not mean that you're not going to see significant impacts. We have overnight had 14 different tornado warnings. There's likely to be more of those throughout today. Warnings were issued in Palm Beach, Hendry, Glades, and Collier County. Now, parts of our state are starting to feel the effects already. Certainly, if you're in North Florida, you still have time to execute your plan, but you got to do it now. You have time to get to a shelter, but you got to do it now. Every minute that goes by brings us closer to having conditions that are going to be simply too dangerous to navigate. But if you are in the northern part of the state and you have access and you're in an evacuation zone and you've been told to evacuate, you do have time to do it now, so do it. But don't wait another 6 hours, 7 hours and say, oh man, this thing looks big, and think that you're going to want to go out. That will be very hazardous to do that. With all of the evacuation orders, there's going to be a time, and some of that time may have been reached in southern parts of the state, where your local official is going to tell you it's too late to stay put. I don't think that we've reached that in northern Florida yet, but wherever you are, if your local EM officials say that it's too hazardous to go and that you're better off just hunkering down, heed that advice. I know Jared's talking about with the folks about the winds. We're looking at the Skyway Bridge is having, I don't know if they've closed it yet, but I think that was imminent. So you're starting to see this. So just listen to your local officials depending on where you are in the state. And there will become a time in North Florida as the hours pass today where they may tell you stay put. But don't put yourself at risk. We have fatalities on the roadways in hazardous conditions almost every storm, and those can be avoided with proper planning. Remember also, we're going to experience power outages. A lot of people use generators, and that's great, but please use the generator properly. If you use the generator inside your house, that could kill you. You got to keep the generator outside the house, a safe distance from any doors or windows. You can't let the carbon monoxide get into your home. So please use the generators appropriately. Also, in terms of shelters, so if you are in an evacuation zone, you've been ordered. Some people just recommended evacuation. Some people may not have been told to, but they look and maybe they feel like they need to get out. There are shelters available. If you want to look at the shelters available in your particular county, go to floridadisaster.org/shelters, and you will see the options that you have. All counties are required to have at least one pet-friendly shelter. So please do not leave your pets behind. Make sure that you take them with them. We want to keep our pets safe in addition to our families. The Division of Emergency Management has partnered with Uber, we announced yesterday, to provide free rides to shelters for Floridians in counties that are under a state of emergency, which is almost all of them at this point. So if you want to use that, the Uber code is Helene Relief when you book your ride. Just one, all in one, no space, Helene Relief, and when you book your ride. So take advantage of that. Obviously, we're reaching the point where that's not going to be an option as the storm gets closer. But I can tell you, if you're in Tallahassee, if you're in Wakulla, if you're in some of the northern Florida, and there's Ubers available, you still have time right now to be able to take advantage of that. Lastly, as we've learned in major storms, two of the greatest dangers are tree limbs falling on roofs, as well as driving during the storm. So once the storm hits, do not go out on the roadways. There will be hazardous conditions. Do not drive in standing water. You're going to see roadways that are going to be flooded throughout the state of Florida. You're putting yourself at risk if you do that. Also, if you're sheltering at your home, be aware of the tree limbs that are on your property or adjacent to your home. Try to be in an interior room or away from limbs that could fall through the roof or window and cause harm. And we do see fatalities that happen in these storms because of tree limbs falling on homes. And you can have a great home that can withstand a Category 3 storm winds. It's a lot more difficult to withstand a big tree falling on your roof. So take a look at that and know that is a very real hazard when it comes to this storm. Tampa International, St. Pete Clearwater, and Tallahassee airports are now closed. Additional flight cancellations or delays are being reported at other Florida airports. Check with the airlines directly on specific flight updates, but given the magnitude of the storm, how far out some of the winds are going, and again, it's not going to be a Category 4 wind 200 miles away, but it's creating tropical conditions, and having flight cancellations or delays is absolutely something that is foreseeable and that you should take into account when you're making your arrangements. We do anticipate Tampa, St. Pete Clearwater to open relatively soon after the storm has passed, and I know the people in Tallahassee are going to try to be doing that as well. Now, the storm is going to make landfall this evening. It will likely be dark by the time the storm passes. Do not try to do any work in the dark. You don't know what hazards are out there. There's going to be debris. There's going to potentially, in some parts, there's going to be standing water. That is difficult to navigate as it is, but to be doing that in the dark of night is hazardous. The sun's going to come out. You're going to have time to take stock of this. You're going to have time to do what you need to do. When you do that, make sure you're using proper ladder safety. We do have people that have accidents, and we've seen fatalities based on misuses of ladders. There are going to be groups that are coming into Florida that will help you with some of the things that may be damaged to your house. And Kevin and his team have worked hard with these groups now. We work with them for many storms. And so if you have somebody that's elderly, don't put yourself at risk by jumping on a ladder to remove a tree that may have fallen on your property. We get some of these guys to go out there and help you. There's going to be a lot of assistance available. So particularly for those who are elderly or who may be at risk, don't take the risk of doing that. Also, pay attention to live wires and avoid standing water. Now, the Division of Emergency Management has a total of 1,100 missions that are in progress. As Kevin mentioned, some of that is pre-storm, but a lot of that is people wanting to be prepared for post-storm response, and so they're going to continue fulfilling those requests, and that's everything from high water vehicles to generators to personnel. And we're going to continue to work with our folks, particularly our fiscally constrained counties up here in North Florida. There are 35,000 shelf-stable meals that are staged near the anticipated area of storm impact, and they will be deployed as needed. We also have tens of thousands of linemen that are at safe locations just outside potential area of impact. When that storm passes, they are going to go in and begin the power restoration, and that's something that's been a priority for us when we do the storm response. There is mutual aid available. I've spoken to the major companies, I've spoken to the co-ops, I've spoken to the municipals. I think everybody is of the same mind that they want to get after this very quickly. So if you have access to the mutual aid, take it. We want to be helpful at the state level to be able to help you do that. Whatever damage this brings, if we're able to get people back up on their feet with the electrical, that makes a huge difference. And obviously, we want to get the debris out of the road so people can move around again. So that is available, and we want to put those to use. Of course, we've mentioned many times how we use the Starlink internet devices. We've got over 100 that are deployed in areas that could lose the internet, and we've sent generators to 130 different gas stations. When the storms hit, it's usually not because there's not enough fuel that the gas stations aren't open. A lot of times it's because they don't have the power to be able to operate the pumps. Now, new stations and large stations are already built in Florida with new generators, but when you look at some of the stations in northern Florida, some of them are older, some of them are smaller. So Kevin and his team have dispatched 130 to gas stations. That will allow them to continue to sell gasoline in the immediate aftermath of the storm. And I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to want. Kevin, I mentioned yesterday, and DEM have executed fuel contracts. So we've brought in a lot of fuel to the state of Florida. We haven't seen fuel shortages. I mean, there have been some lines places, but the fuel has been able to be replenished. So we feel good about the fuel situation that we're doing. We now have 3,500 soldiers. We can surge that by another 2,000 from our National Guard if needed. We have 200 state troopers with Florida Highway Patrol that will also deploy immediately following the storm. Florida Department of Transportation has 1,700 of its members that are working on preparing and staging and response to the storm. And that's 550 generators, 230 pieces of large equipment, and 40 large pumps. Be able to get some of that water out of some of these low-lying areas. Our Florida Division of Environmental Protection has pre-authorized 871 disaster debris management sites for the counties included in our executive order so that they can temporarily stage debris that is generated by this storm, and particularly in this Tallahassee region, we do anticipate there to be some significant debris. We also have troopers that have assisted with evacuations in a variety of Florida counties, and as of today, there are 80 healthcare facilities that have reported various levels of evacuations: hospitals, assisted living facilities, and nursing homes. So the storm, it's coming. We're already seeing some effects in the southern part of the state. We're going to continue to see conditions deteriorate throughout the rest of the day, and we are anticipating a landfall as likely a major hurricane sometime this evening. So if you are in the area of the expected landfall, this Big Bend, Tallahassee region, you still have time to execute that plan. You do have time to heed the call of your local officials if they're telling you to evacuate, but that time is certainly running out, and you're not going to have all day to be able to do that. So please make the decisions that are going to be best for you and your family. We're going to be here all through the storm, and we'll ride out the storm in the Emergency Operations Center. We anticipate that this building's going to be fine. We do have contingencies in place, but we're going to be itching to get on the scene and see what needs to be done in terms of helping up with the recovery efforts. We do have a lot of personnel that are staged and ready to go for search and rescue. We needed that in past storms. We haven't needed it in some of the storms more recently, like Idalia, as much, because I think a lot of people heeded the warnings and were able to run away from the areas that had the big surge. We'll see what happens on this one, but we've got all our assets that are mobilized, ready to go. I've also been in contact with the sheriffs from the surrounding counties here. And they've been working with their residents about the impending storm. They've assisted with evacuations, but they also understand that some people have made decisions that they're going to hunker down, even though they were requested to leave. So, regardless of how that shakes out, if there's people that are going to be in distress, we're going to be there to be able to assist in those efforts. And with that, I'm going to bring up Kevin Guthrie.
Thank you so much, Governor. And again, thank you for being here early with us and staying with us throughout this this impact that's going to be happening over the next 24 to 36 hours. With that being said, conditions in the Big Bend area today will continue to deteriorate, as the governor has mentioned. There is a danger of potential life-threatening storm surge along the west coast of Florida, including the Big Bend. Some areas could experience 3 to 5 and as much as 15 feet of storm surge today. Again, as I think visuals are always good. The men standing here with me are, around 6 feet tall, maybe a little bit taller. And, that's going to be as high as we can reach. It's going to be much higher than that. So you cannot survive that. So please make sure you're evacuating the area. If you're in the North Florida area, you do have time to evacuate, but that time is now. It is right now. You need to be moving to a location. We have shelters across the Big Bend area that are available. So please, if you need that information, floridadisaster.org/shelters to find out where a shelter is available for you. Please remember that evacuating doesn't mean you have to go all the way to Atlanta, Georgia. In fact, as the governor said yesterday, it's probably not the best place to go is up towards Georgia, as this is where that storm is going to go and dump a lot of rain. You only need to drive tens of miles. Again, get yourself to a shelter. That's where we need you to go. If you don't want to stay in a shelter, then yes, you're going to need to move west towards Pensacola, towards the deeper portions of the Panhandle, and seek some type of shelter in a hotel there. Again, you can get to that through our website by getting to Visit Florida and get that information. As the governor said before, we have the free Uber ride, so please make sure you're taking advantage of that. Again, we do not have a lot of mass transportation in the fiscally constrained counties around Tallahassee, so the division has activated a bus contract, and we are providing buses to individuals in the surrounding communities. If you need a ride and you're in the Big Bend area, you've got the Uber capability, but you also have the ability of calling 1-800-729-3413. Again, that's 1-800-729-3413, and we will send a transportation asset to pick you up. Again, we need to act on that right now. If you choose to shelter in place, you need to stay put until the storm has passed. I would also encourage you to call somebody and tell them you're sheltering in place. That way, there's some type of check and balance there so that we know that you did not evacuate. Again, we don't want you to shelter in place, but if you decide to do that, make sure you call a friend or a loved one outside the area and let them know. But don't forget, to call them after to let them know that you're safe. If you hear trees snapping, this is a very, very valid point. We haven't really had an opportunity to talk about this. If you hear trees snapping around your home, treat it like a tornado. At that point in time, get to an interior portion of your home, most likely a bathroom, get as low as you can. If you have some type of protective material, a heavy blanket, a comforter, maybe a very, very small thin mattress, get to that point, put it over the top of yourselves, and hunker down there. Treat it just as you would a tornado. You will hear trees snapping. Pine trees snapping sound an awful lot like fireworks or potentially gunshots. So please make sure if you hear that, act immediately. Get to the interior portion of your home, away from glass, most likely a bathroom, and stay there until you hear that sound stop. If, again, for the people in the Tallahassee area, if all of a sudden it goes from catastrophic trees popping to absolutely nothing, that does not mean the storm is over. What that actually means is you're in the eye of the hurricane. All right? Do not go out and survey damage. This eye is projected to be anywhere from 50 miles wide to 20 miles wide. But again, if it's moving at 21 miles an hour and it's a 20-mile wide eye wall, you may have only 30 minutes, 45 minutes before that eye wall collapses right back on you and trees start snapping again. So again, if it goes from horrible and terrible to absolutely nothing, there's a 99% chance that you're in the eye wall. Stay in place. Do not move. We want to make sure you do that. Don't go in outdoors until it's deemed to be safe. If you lose power and are going to be using a generator, as the governor said, we want you to follow our 20-20-20 rule. There's an opportunity to do the last 20, but we want to keep it outdoors, 20 feet away from your home and away from all windows. You're going to wait 20 minutes before you refuel that generator, and then you make sure you keep it on a dry, flat surface, and then invest $20 to get you a carbon monoxide detector and put it inside your home. That'll save your life. Residents needing residents needing resources before and after the hurricane can call our state assistance information line at 1-800-342-3557. Again, that's 1-800-342-3557. We have individuals there for English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole speaking. And then also be sure to follow us on X, Instagram at FLSERT, that's at Florida CERT, and then on Facebook at FDM. And again, Governor, as well as John and Jared, thank you so much for everything you do for the Division of Emergency Management. Appreciate you.
Okay, Jared.
All right, thank you, Governor, for your leadership. Thank you, Kevin, for your leadership at the division, General Haas. We've been in very close coordination since this storm formed. We've been coordinating very closely with our law enforcement partners, with the Florida Highway Patrol, and also our industry partners at our seaports, airports, and rail. We have taken extensive efforts to prepare for this storm. As you heard from the governor, we have nearly 2,000 team members working the storm, staging, and preparing to respond. We are really looking at the path of the storm now and preparing our operation for cut and toss, for damage assessment, and for bridge inspection. We're going to be very focused on those coastal bridges as this storm passes through. We want to get them inspected and repaired as quickly as possible so people can move around. In the path of the storm, I-10 and US 98 are two major routes that we're going to be looking at. US 98 obviously has some vulnerabilities along the coast, so we're going to be focused on those. There will potentially be a lot of vegetative debris, a lot of trees down. Those trees can be wrapped in power lines. Please do not get out and explore. It can be dangerous. If you see water on the road, please do not drive through it, especially if it's around a culvert or a bridge. It can be very dangerous to drive through water. We have 120 bridge inspectors on standby. They will deploy immediately as soon as it's safe to do so. We're already beginning to see high wind speeds on the west Gulf Coast of Florida. As you heard from the governor, the closure of Skyway is imminent. And just as a reminder, when wind speeds reach 40 miles per hour or greater, local law enforcement and Florida Highway Patrol usually start to close those bridges. So if you still need to evacuate, please get out while you can move around safely. As the storm passes through, FL511.com is the most reliable place to get information on road closures, detours, etc. We will be updating that website live as the storm passes through. And throughout the night, we've had our 10 traffic management centers monitoring traffic live. We've had our road ranger service patrols on 24/7 operations, and we've been monitoring all of our roads during the evacuations and helping facilitate those evacuations, and we're going to continue to do that. Again, as the storm passes through, please remember there will be a lot of trees down, there will be a lot of vegetative debris. Do not drive through water. You heard from the governor, Tallahassee Airport, Tampa Airport, St. Pete are all closed. We hope to see those open up as soon as possible after the storm passes through. We have several seaports right now that have closed waterside along the coast, just preparing for the storm. And again, we'll coordinate closely with them and the Coast Guard to open those back up as soon as the storm passes through. Again, thank you, Governor, for your leadership, and we'll continue to work.
Also, as the for folks that are in these low-lying areas that could experience major storm surge, electric vehicles, when they have the saltwater intrusion, that has generated fires in the past, and those are very difficult fires to put out. So if you do have one of those, try to get that to higher ground as well, because it does represent a hazard for the safety. And we actually had in Ian, we had homes that were completely fine withstanding a Cat 5 impact, and then got burned down because of the EV that was in the garage and caught fire. So try to avoid that if you can. Again, if you are particularly if you're in northern Florida, I mean, you can leave now if you're in an evacuation zone. You have time to execute this plan, but that time is really running out very quickly. Listen to wherever you are in Florida, listen to your local officials about whether it has come to the point where you just need to hunker down. And that may be the case in some of the southern parts of Florida that are experiencing more impacts now. As the day goes on up here in North Florida, that is going to be something that they're going to say, because it's going to be very hazardous conditions when you're, and it's not going to be safe to be out on the road. So I want to thank everybody for mobilizing up to this point. We've got a lot of assets, as we always do, available, and we will bring those to bear as soon as the storm passes, and first helping people with life and limb that may be in jeopardy, but then two, restoring the critical services, whether that's transportation or whether that is power, and we have the resources in place to be able to help do that. And with that, I'll take some questions. Yep.
With this storm being the third hurricane to hit the financially constrained counties, how much of a strain does that put on state resources to help these people that are struggling to pay for one storm, let alone three?
We've always stepped up and helped fiscally constrained counties in Florida, and we'll continue to do that. I mean, look, we put aside $500 million a year for disaster response. We started that when I became governor, and we're in a very strong fiscal shape now. We believe in utilizing whatever levers available. If I can get money elsewhere, I will do that for the counties. But we're in a good shape to be able to step up and help them. And we'll see. This is not projected to reach a Michael strength, but you never know, right? And but I remember, like Mexico Beach, the debris cost was like $80 million, and their annual budget was like $8 million. Well, that's not going to be something that's going to be feasible. So we know there's going to be need for support for fiscally constrained counties. Kevin and his team have already done a lot to help them on the outset and leading up to the storm, and we'll continue to be a good partner with them on the way back. Yes.
What could you tell locals on what should we expect for the aftermath of Tallahassee? I mean, will Tallahassee look like Tallahassee anymore after this?
Well, look, I think, on the one hand, if you look at the track that we were talking about last night, that was a track that we have not seen in that magnitude hit Tallahassee in anybody's lifetime. And if that were to happen, that there is just going to be a lot of debris. I mean, it is going to push down a lot of trees, and it will cause significant damage. Now, we always prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And as I said at the outset, you have seen the models nudge it more to the east. And if you're on the west side of the storm, the amount of damage is just less than if you're on the east side of the storm. That's just the way these things work. And if you look at the solutions, a lot of the model runs, there's a lot of them that have it more on the Idalia track. I think the NHC's cone, I think they've they've been on the western side of where all the models are. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but there is a lot of data out there that does want to nudge it east. So in terms of Tallahassee, every model run that nudges it east, if that's the track it takes, that will mean less damage. There's just no question. Anything that moves it west is just going to be more damage. And so we're prepared. I've spoken with the mayor of the city. We've spoken with the county leadership. I've spoken with the sheriff. People are ready. They're taking this seriously. They know that they have the potentially going to be called upon to execute a response that has just not been something that they've been called upon to do. I remember, I wasn't governor, but when they had Hermine, that was not something that there was good preparation for on the local level. You had a lot of people that were without power for a long time. It just didn't seem. That is not the way it's being done this time. So I think that from local up, people are taking it really seriously, and we're going to respond accordingly. But this track change is going to make an impact. And if you told me it was going to hit 50 miles east of Tallahassee, then I'd be comfortable saying that the impacts would be less than what the track was yesterday, because it has to be. That's just the way these storms work. Yes.
I'm wondering what the scenario is that you're managing now on the power specifically for the affected Big Bend counties. Are we talking a couple weeks, a month, maybe without power? I mean, just
well, a lot of times it just depends on the extent of the damage. I mean, we had Idalia. We had that was the fastest restoration from a major hurricane in the history of our responses. And part of it is because we had mutual aid with these electrical co-ops and the municipals. Just the way it is, I mean, the private utilities have more manpower, right? So if you're in an area, Florida Power and Light or Duke, they have, some of the smaller outfits just don't have as much. So Kevin and his team, we've worked really hard to provide that mutual aid. Now, if you're talking about Tallahassee, the more debris that's there, that could interrupt the ability to get to the power lines. And so we're going to have Jared, we're going to have FDOT, they're going to be helping. I've spoken with the county and the city about making sure they have debris contracts ready to go, but getting the utility workers to the place where they can hook it back up is going to be something that's important. Now, if it's more of an Idalia track, this is like deja vu all over again, right? I mean, we had Idalia, we had Debbie, very similar tracks. If this does nudge east, you're going to have a storm that, maybe it's more powerful than Idalia, maybe it's a little less. We'll see. Idalia reached Cat 4 before landfall, and then it receded to a Cat 3 when it hit landfall. So you could have something that's very similar. So I think there's a lot. But we're going to have over 30,000 linemen that are going to be staged and ready to go. I would note that there are some relatively minor power outages across the state, largely because of these tornadoes that we've seen. Now, those companies, a lot of that's FPL, and they'll get that back on very quickly. But I think the municipal and the rural co-ops, they've really embraced taking mutual aid. They've embraced going in and trying to get the stuff back on as quickly as possible. Now, if there is damage to not just the lines, but the underlying system that can be destroyed in these things, then that makes it because you have to rebuild the system. Now, it didn't happen in Idalia. It did happen in a couple areas in Hurricane Ian right there on the coast. Now, hopefully, there's not a projection that this is going to be as powerful as Ian, but you never know. This is they've got a great runway in the Gulf of Mexico. The water's warm. It's deep right where the storm is now. It could rapidly intensify. So if you have that structural destruction, then you have to rebuild. We did not have to do that in Idalia. And then what Kevin has been dispatching are these flood protection devices around the utility substations. And I think a lot of them have utilized that up here. So they've been able to do, and what that does is, if you have some surge, if you have a flood, it can keep that substation operating. And that makes a huge difference in terms of the power restoration. So we've got huge amounts of assets that are ready to go. The scope of the storm, the path of the storm is really going to depend on, in terms of the power, will depend on the path and scope of what ends up happening.
Do you know how many substations have that flood control device around it?
I don't know.
We filled dozens of missions. I can code you out and get you a
Okay. All right. Just curious.
Yes.
I have a question for Mr. Guthrie.
Sure.
So with this major hurricane, or it's expected to become a major hurricane, or it was, up to maybe a Category 4, still things up in the air. Why doesn't Leon County have an evacuation order? A lot of people are leaving. They're scared. They're nervous. I know Wakulla does. Franklin, the counties around it do.
Yeah. So in reference to the question about Leon County specifically and evacuation order, we probably need to fact check that, because I do believe Leon County has an evacuation order right now for low-lying areas and manufactured homes, which makes sense. If you come here, and I'm going to just briefly, if you allow me, Governor, put my local county EM director hat back on. Where we sit at right now is 45, 50 feet above sea level. We are not going to have storm surge impacts here. There is no level A, B, C, D, E, F evacuation zone for Tallahassee. It's low-lying manufactured homes. That is their evacuation order. So, again, I want to give credit where credit's due. The governor's been up here talking about the mayor and the city getting much better, the county getting much better at responding to these disasters. And they have been doing yeoman's work at getting ready for what's about to happen. So they have issued their evacuation orders for low-lying and manufactured housing, which is appropriate for this particular storm. We're not going to have storm surge. We're not going to have riverine flooding up all the way into Leon County proper. So, they're doing the right thing as a local former county EM director, and as a state director now. Yes, 100%. We support their decisions on what they've done. They have opened up, I believe, 7 shelters here. They have asked the state to help supplement that, and I believe we have 3 other shelters in addition to that, ready and able to take on individuals in this area.
And the thing about, and Kevin's exactly right, you're not in a surge situation when you're talking about Leon, but, and so you don't want to tell people, hey, just evacuate willy-nilly. At the same time, individuals can look at their home, look what's around it, and assess what risk may be there, because you could have very powerful winds. You could see trees start to fall over. I mean, we had, at the governor's place, we had a really big tree there for Idalia, and Idalia was not, right now the track is closer to Tallahassee than Idalia was, and that tree fell over from that. And it didn't do structural damage to the home, but it's just, that was a massive tree. So the closer it is to Tallahassee, and the winds are 120, 125 potentially for what they're talking about, that is going to be. So you just as a resident, you look, you see, you think about, assess the risk, and there may be places, as Kevin said, you could treat it like a tornado, get in a place where you can hunker down, and maybe that's the best option for you. But it's hard to just fashion an evacuation order around that. I think you just got to trust people to make their own judgments. But debris is going to be an issue. Trees falling is going to be an issue. The more the track shifts east, the better off for Tallahassee, of course. The more that it stays on course or toggles back west, if that is possible. And it doesn't seem like that's where most of the models are tugging it right now. But, these things change. There's a lot of different factors on there that will, of course, mean more damage if it's a more westward path. But I think people can make their judgments about that. But we do have, in almost every storm, we have people that are not doing anything wrong. They're taking the storm seriously, and then a tree falls on the home and can cause fatal damage. And we've seen that. We had I think it was a young girl in the most recent, was just they weren't doing anything wrong, and it's a tragic thing, but that is a possibility, especially when you're talking about an area that has as much tree cover as Tallahassee. Okay, thanks so much.